side, and what is your first tip that you've got for us today, Jamie?
Okay, my first tip is based on Aesop's fable, which is the tortoise and the hare. And just in case listeners aren't familiar with what that is, so obviously that is the battle between the plucky, determined hare and the slow, ponderous tortoise. So we've got our arrogant hare, who's kind of strutting around and challenges the tortoise to a race. And basically our arrogant hare sprints off he goes, and stops for a little snooze, and our kind of slow, ponderous tortoise basically wins the race. Now, what does that have to do with teaching? I guess to use another anecdote, when I was at the start of my teaching career, I was very much the hare. So I was kind of sprinting around, teaching rapid pace, outstanding lessons, showing off, working a ludicrous amount of hours, and I worked in a very odd school, basically, which has been in the news a lot recently, and I won't give too much away, but it's been in the news a lot recently, and I got promoted at the end of my second year of teaching to an assistant head teacher in charge of teaching and learning in the English department, and I kept going with my kind of hare approach, and predictably, kind of rapidly burnt out completely and utterly, and I was quite ill for a kind of period of time. And sort of in the 10 years preceding that, what I've tried to do is kind of reflect more on, I guess, how you can apply the slow tortoise philosophy into life in the classroom. Because one of the things I'm very passionate about, I guess, is about how we can support teachers to ensure longevity in the classroom. So how does that work in terms of practically for teachers? Because this is a top tip. So I guess the top tip after all that rambling, I guess, is to bring the mindset into the classroom. And that mindset is about slow, incremental steps that will help you to improve. And you can apply, and I've stretched this slow philosophy into many different aspects of teaching and learning, but you can apply this slow lens through lots and lots of stuff. And for me, I'm really interested in kind of concepts around minimalism as well. And the whole minimalism idea is kind of stripping everything back to its bare essentials. And I think as teachers, we face a huge amount of pressure to very quickly become expert teachers and to become kind of fantastic in the classroom. But it's not sustainable. So my argument is, and my top tip is, be slow and enjoy the process of learning and growing as a teacher. If that makes sense.
It, Jamie. I love this. It's really good. It's something that's come up in a conversation I had with Sonia Thompson. We were talking about career progression of teachers, and certainly for a secondary maths teacher, there's a lot of pressure to really accelerate with your career, because maths teachers are like gold dust, and I assume it's the same with kind of science teachers and a lot of the other shortage subjects. So if you've been around for a couple of years as a maths teacher, you've got your pick of jobs, and people are offering you decent money to be second in department, then head of department, then it's assistant head. And, well, from a practical level, unless you've got your real kind of foundation of teaching kind of experience and expertise under your belts, it becomes very hard, because you're taking on all these extra responsibilities, and your teaching isn't quite at the level where you'd like it to be, so you can't just turn up and deliver a half-decent lesson because you don't have that experience. And it just becomes a bit of a nightmare, and you end up doing none of your responsibilities well. You're not teaching well, you're not managing your team well, and so on. But there's a real pressure, isn't there, Jamie, in teaching to kind of progress, because it's one of those jobs where there's a definite kind of career ladder that opens out in front of you, and sometimes you see your colleagues around you getting promotions. It's hard to sometimes think, no, you know what, I'm going to focus either on my teaching or this kind of incremental changes, when there's lots of opportunities available, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really hard because, as you say, you're kind of watching everyone else. And there's that phrase as well, which I really, really hate, which is that, when you say to people, what do you do? And you go, oh, I'm just a teacher. Yeah. And you're like, it's mind-boggling, because teaching is the best job in the world. And it's fantastically complex and fantastically enriching. And, I guess my career went fantastically backwards. So initially I was kind of, assistant head teacher in London, on a big salary, swanning around in a black suit. I had to shave my head as well, it was bizarre. Anyway, I won't go into that. But, I was doing all this amazing, career stuff. But the happiest I was in terms of my teaching career, as it were, was the last 3 years, where I've been a classroom teacher on a full timetable, just loving the process and the experience of being in my own classroom and teaching. Because actually, although, it's hearkened as the great stuff being promoted, all that sort of stuff, a lot of the real joy of working in schools is working with young people. So I think we should strip away that just the teacher forever and actually celebrate that I'm a teacher, I'm a classroom teacher, and I'm learning how to be a bit better all the time.
I like that. The other thing I've just noted down here, when I was thinking of preparing for our conversation, and I know I really like your slow philosophy, I really like this, and it made me think about another conversation I'd had recently with Sarah Cottingham, and we were talking about teachers almost kind of being bombarded with tips and advice and strategies and so on. And the real danger there is that, you see something on Twitter and you think, oh God, I'm not doing that, so I best bring that into my lesson. Or you hear a podcast and you think, oh, flipping, that's a good idea, let's bring that in. And it's a similar kind of thing that you get bombarded with all these ideas. It's overwhelming for you. You're in a rush to try everything because you want to improve as a teacher. You want your kids to have as good an experience as possible. But it can be a bit overwhelming. And it just struck me that your kind of this slow approach and this tortoise and the hare can apply to kind of strategies within the classroom as well, just kind of doing one thing at a time, but doing that thing really well and resisting the temptation, and it's hard to resist it, to kind of try more stuff, if that makes sense as well.
Oh, it totally does. And there's a balance, I think, as well, because, stuff like this, I think, is so motivational and inspiring for teachers to come across little tips and to come across ideas and to reflect on what they might change and develop in their classroom, and that keeps you fueling and wanting to improve. But also you've got to play the long game, because if we consider things like questioning, you could spend a year in your classroom just thinking, do you know what, this year I'm going to get really, really good at questioning, and I'm going to practice it, and I'm going to get some feedback, and I'm going to do it really, really slowly, and by the end of the year I will be significantly better at questioning. But I wouldn't have this kind of cognitive overwhelm of all this other stuff. So I think there's a balance to be had with both. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It can be very overwhelming to be a teacher in the kind of modern technology-driven age as well, I think.
Fantastic. The other thing I was going to say to you, Jamie, and this might come up in the other tips, but I'm one of these annoying people who anytime they're reading a book, it transforms my whole life. I get obsessed with books at the time. My current one I'm reading, and I thought this, you've probably read it, but if not, I thought this would be right up your street. Have you read 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Bergman? Have you come across this one yet?
No, I love good book recommendation.
This is up your alley. I'll tell you now, if I was you, I'd stop talking to me now, just hang up and go read this book. It's amazing. It's the idea that our life is 4,000, our average life is 4,000 weeks long, and to avoid kind of falling into this productivity trap and this race to get everything done, and realising that you're never going to get everything done, you're never going to be able to put enough attention into being a good father, being a good husband, being a good teacher, being a good... all these kind of things, you try and fit everything in, and it just becomes overwhelming and everything suffers. And it just struck me again that this notion of this slow approach really fits in with this idea. And one idea that was really kind of resonated when you were saying this is you want to kind of strive to the next stage in your career, but actually focusing on what you're doing now and finding joy and pleasure in that is so important. And the way Bergman explains it is find pleasure in the mundane. So, all right, I've got another week, I've got a full timetable ahead of me. You could see it as, oh, that's the same as I did last week, the same as I did last year, I want to change. But actually, no, if you just take joy in those moments, find joy in the smallest of things within there, then you start to really appreciate what's going on in the moment. You get better and better and better at that, and that you're not in this continual race to kind of strive for variety to improve things. And it just, I really, the more I read about kind of taking things slower, the more I realise what an error I've been making for about 15 years, but what I can start to do now to start making things better, if that makes sense.
Great, I absolutely love it. As soon as this conversation is over, I am buying that book.
Oh, you're onto it. Honestly,
it's,
Jamie, it could have been written by you, to be honest with you. I reckon he's nicked a fair bit of your stuff, so I'd get the lead.
Take it all for me, I tell you. But it's really, if you think, I think we're in similar positions where we've got young children, and actually the life as a father with young children is remarkably mundane, because you're doing the same thing over and over again. But as you say, finding the way to look at that makes it joyful, makes it energetic, is such a positive way to look at the world, isn't it? So thank you for the recommendation. Love it.